So last night we had a breaking report that the Paycheck Protection Program had run out of funding. There was a premature fundulation. And I promised that I would dig into this as much as I possibly can, speak to as many people as I can so we can get some clarity here, because it just did not make sense. We had something like $30 billion in remaining funding just a few days ago, and then all of a sudden there's no funding left. The SBA stops accepting applications. Lenders are like, what's going on? So I've dug into this. I have spoken to many people who are much more in the know, who are actually doing the darn thing here. And I have a much better idea as to why this happened and what this means for everyone in various steps of the loan process, whether you're still waiting for your loan to be funded, whether you just applied, whether you have some kind of SBA hold code error issue. There's actually some good news there, believe it or not. And if funding is actually coming your way, meaning you've already been approved and it says funding should be coming your way, there's also some good news there. So let's first just give some context here as to what exactly happened. Pop over to the computer screen here real quick. So this is the report that came out on the 2nd of May. These reports come out every single week. We can see the total net dollars approved for the Paycheck Protection Program was $780 billion. So I saw this the other day and I was like, okay, we're right on track. There's still about $33 billion or so left in available funding. It dropped by about $10 billion in the last week. We should be good to go. Nothing strange here. We're pretty much on course for the funding to run out about the end of the month, and it may have led to a situation where we're not too bad, where, either most people receive funding or everyone receives funding and the deadline is about dead on. Over time, as time has passed, the expectations for how long this funding was going to last just expanded further and further and further. At first, the expectation was right about at the beginning of May, it'd be out of funding and chaos would ensue. But then as time went on and these reports kept coming out, it looked like it was going to be okay. Then they said mid-May, we should be good through mid-May. And then last week it was like, well, it should maybe be the end of May. And the SBA was just sitting there the whole time like, sure, say whatever you want. Lenders do their calculations. Well, obviously this wasn't actually the case, because what happened here is the SBA, yes, they were reporting these numbers. They were reporting that there was, $30+ billion in available funding, but they didn't report what the additional expenses are of that $30 billion. So looking at this report, it looks like, yeah, there's $30 billion left to give to small businesses, but the SBA didn't itemize what exactly that $30 billion had to go to. And this is the situation that we're running into. So let's go over to the iPad here real quick so I can highlight what exactly is going on. Okay, so we have about 30 billion remaining in total funding per this SBA report that just came out on the 2nd of May. Now, the SBA has since said, because I reached out to a few people who know members of Senate, and they reached out to the White House to figure out what exactly is going on here. The SBA has since said that of that 30 billion, about 13 billion is allocated for lender fees. Basically, the fees that lenders receive in order to process these loans, which, okay, that's fine. That's a part of the program and it's part of the total allocated funding. But why would there not be a line item on the actual report that shows, hey, $13 billion of, the 1 trillion that is being spent on this program still needs to be sent to lenders. So that can't be used for, the loan summary here, because everyone is using this document to forecast how many loans are left, including lenders. Like, lenders were completely in the dark here. It's just so ridiculous. And then on top of this, there's about $6 billion in hold codes and intake. Now, this is actually good news. Sorry about my handwriting, but this one's actually good news, because hold codes and intake are the people who are stuck at the SBA right now in some kind of processing. If you happen to apply with Womply, that would be the lender secondary review. Now, there are tons of hold codes. There's like 40+ hold codes as to why your loan may be stuck at the SBA. A lot of people, it seems like they have hold codes because they applied through multiple lenders and the SBA thinks that you're trying to do something fishy even though you aren't. And luckily, in this case, it seems like the SBA has already considered those people funded when it comes to the allocation of funds, which means if there was no additional funding to be allocated for this program, which I'm optimistic that there will be, if there was no additional funding, these people will most likely have their loans, the issues worked out, and will still be funded, which is amazing news. Amazing that these people will not be screwed, for lack of a better word. As long as, there's not legitimate issues, there's always going to be errors and glitches, but it seems like the majority of people will be okay in this regard as of the latest information that we have on this. So that is, I'm just so happy that I saw that. So $6 billion in hold codes / intake, $3 billion of this 30 is new loans. And these new loans are basically just loans that have been approved since this report came out on the 2nd of May. So in the 2 or 3 days since that report came out, depending on when you're calculating it. So $3 billion in new loans that were approved at the SBA, and then $8 billion in CFI / CDFI institutions, which are minority institutions. We're going to talk about that more in a second. But there's also something I want to highlight here, that with how the funding works, if I can get myself over the screen, with how the funding works, the funding is considered allocated at the SBA if your loan has been approved. So if you've signed a promissory note, if there's some kind of status that says you are in the process of actually being funded, if you have been accepted, the SBA counts that as funding allocated, which again is absolute huge news. So if you've been approved, you can assume that you will receive funding, unless again there's some kind of error or glitch or other, just BS that happens with this program. But for most people who applied in a timely manner, you should be okay as long as you are approved, or even if you applied a while ago and you're running into some kind of issue, because again, there's a $6 billion backlog. We can pull out a calculator here and take $6 billion. Let me go over to the screen here real quick. Again, $6 billion divided by the average loan size of 46,000. That's 130,000 additional loans that are potentially sitting at the SBA waiting for some kind of hold code to be erased and approved. So that is very exciting for those individuals and anyone who's already been approved. Now onto the CDI and the CDFI issue with the $8 billion in allocated funding for those minority institutions. If you're looking for a minority institution, I found this handy tool that allows you to find a CDI or CDFI based on your state. I'll have this linked in the description. You just choose your area and the program that you're looking for, which on this is just Paycheck Protection Program, and you're able to find a CDI, CDFI. Now, most companies who connect people with lenders work with CDIs and CDFIs already. So if you applied with Blue Acorn or Womply or any of those front-end processors, they have CDIs already. So there's already a chance that you may be connected with one. However, you can always try to get in contact with another one. I'll have that linked in the description. How you proceed with that information is completely up to you. Now, a question that I had with all of this is, who knew that this was going to happen? Who knew that the programs were going to run out? Because it seems like lenders had no idea. So I spoke to some people who are in contact with senators and the White House, and it seems like pretty much no one except for the SBA knew that this was going to happen. It seems like no one knew any additional information beyond that report that is public and everyone has access to. Because when this ran out, there was several senators and the White House who were like, how did this run out? There was, $30 billion in funding, which is the same question that, most of us are asking. And I think this is good news. The fact that it's surprising to them is good news, because this brings us to the question of what's next. What happens to those who are still waiting to be processed? Because there's a few million businesses who have yet to be completely funded or completely processed here. And we want to make sure that these people are taken care of. I think because it's a surprise, the odds that more funding gets allocated makes sense. I mean, I've brought up this example before. I'll bring it up again. Let's say with the stimulus checks, let's say 180 million people are eligible for stimulus checks, and they allocate $250 billion for that program. And they send out 150 million of that 180 million stimulus checks. And then there's 30 billion remaining. And they're like, oh, you know what? We ran out of money. Sorry, you're not going to get a stimulus check. Does that make sense? No. It doesn't make any sense. So I think there's probably going to be something similar with the Paycheck Protection Program, where it's like if you applied before the deadline, you should be able to get that funding. And I don't think that Congress is going to have an issue, seeing that connection. Now, if you want to help, make sure you contact a local representative to try and push that, because the more pressure, the more anger from the small business community, the more likely that this kind of thing is actually going to happen. So if you want change, we have to all kind of push for change here, because there is no bill that is approved or sitting on the Senate floor or sitting on the House floor right now to allocate more funding for the Paycheck Protection Program. So I'm optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic. So in summary, that $30 billion that was remaining in funding per the SBA didn't include all the line items that should have been included. Things like lender fees, hold codes, which is a good thing for those who are stuck with their application at the SBA. New loans are approved in the last 2 days, which that makes sense that that's not part of the report. And then $8 billion for the CFI, CDFI institutions. And we are optimistic that there will be more funding. And I just wanted to do an update to make sure that you knew everything that I know on this situation. I will let you know as soon as more news comes out, as soon as anything comes out. So make sure you're subscribed to this channel, turn on your notification bells. That way you don't miss anything. I would like to thank you for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.